Good evening. This is the Board Policy Committee meeting for August 15th, 2017. Has the meeting been properly posted, Lynn?
Yes, we have.
Thank you. Any citizens that are wishing to speak? Shh. Teachers. None? We have some action items tonight. The first one is approving the policy minutes from our meeting in July. Any motion on that?
I'll move to approve the July 25th
Moved by Greg,
minutes.
seconded by Barbara. Any questions or additions or subtractions? None? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, Lynn. Thank you. Okay, we have some action items on some policies that the intention here would be to go over those tonight. Approve them at the committee level for a first reading at the September board meeting. So, we have, that one goes away for now. Again, we've made the connections. Policy 3440 and 4440 are related to job-related expenses. And if you look at the policies, it brings in the IRS-approved mileage, cost per mile that they may charge. And it also has an revision on the bottom, giving 30 days by which they have to have the a request for reimbursement in. And any questions on this? Joe, I have one question. I should have thought about this before, because it's a Darren question, but you maybe know the answer. Do they adjust the IRS? Does the IRS just do this once a year? Or do they do it midterms at all? Are we going to get into any changes midterm, you know?
I have not experienced a midterm. I've experienced a once-a-year adjustment. So anywhere in my administrative career from 50 cents a mile to 56 being the highest. And I think they recently brought it down to 55. So
Typically, historically, it's been once a year.
that's been my experience,
Okay.
yes.
It's just a question I had in case it did change mid-season. I'm sure we could come up with something if that were the case.
I can say that the business office does, the language in here doesn't specify the cent reimbursement.
Right.
And the business office does notify all employees if the adjustment is made.
Yes, Barbara?
Oh boy, it's on there. 53.5 cents right now. And that is listed on the reimbursement form that you have at your table.
Joe?
Yeah, thank you, Bill. But it does say in our policy that we will lock it in for 1 year, starting July 1st. I mean, if we read that verbatim, at least it sounded like to me that whatever it is on July 1st, we'll keep for the year.
That is,
It does say that.
And I think that that's fine. I mean, we can reimburse any amount, actually. So that might make it easier on our finance folks in the business office. So I don't have a problem with that, adjusting it once a year. I don't have a problem with adjusting it mid-year either.
Well, except the,
But if we have it here as July 1st, then we need to follow that. So I don't know if we want to give them flexibility or not. Was that on purpose, July 1st, just because of the fiscal year?
that's the
when the
fiscal
IRS
year.
does it.
That's what the budget is based off of. So
Okay.
if it's 53 cents, 53.5 cents per mile going into July 1, that's how they've based their budget on potential reimbursement, so.
Okay, yeah. I'm looking at, let's see, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th, 6th paragraph, where it starts with commercial airfare costs in excess of basic, least expensive, unrestricted accommodations. Kind of goes on through there. It says offered by commercial airlines are unallowable except, and then it goes into a list of exceptions where if there was, prolonged travel or, rerouting and things like that, who actually determines whether one of those exceptions were hit or not.
That, I would have to follow up and ask Darren what that would be. I can speak to how we have looked at travel in my office. When we're looking at we're looking for the cheapest flight, if that's the case. That flight is generally a one-stop trip, in between something in the continental United States. So there's not multiple stops but we are looking at what the cheapest rate is. I think where some of our conversations internally have been is if you're leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning and you're not finally getting to your destination until midnight, that would be when some of these thresholds are hit. But I'd have to follow up with Darren and get back to you on what that.
Let me try something on that, because I read the second paragraph as the answer to the question about who decides that.
Yep, the business office.
Yeah, the business office really is making the validity check.
Okay.
That's why I read it. And by the way, I should have mentioned that sentence has been added to the 4440.
Support
because it was
staff.
missing on there. So that's one of the other changes.
So how do they do that? Is that via spot audit, or is every single expense reviewed?
It would, again, I'm speaking to my submissions
Sure.
for conferences.
Sure.
Mileage is submitted from the point of departure being the district office or your school to the location of the conference. So that's how mileage is configured. That is reviewed once submitted. It's reviewed by the business office and then reimbursed. So I don't get to pick the longest possible route to my conference. I have to pick the most direct, and that is what's reimbursed. Hotel rate, when we are booking hotels, the business office is reimbursing for what is the state rate on those hotels. So we have to present our tax exempt form, and then if the conference offers a state rate. So everything is offered. The conferences that are attended are conferences that are generally sponsored by one of our associations. Those associations factor in the state rates for what is conference. They're tax exempt, so a lot of that factors in. Meal rates, there's a set meal rate reimbursement, which I believe is listed and spelled out on the conference reimbursement form here. So you have a breakfast rate, a lunch rate, and a dinner rate. You don't go beyond that when you're submitting your reimbursements, so you are required to provide receipts. So I think that's where the checking and the auditing comes in.
Okay. And then the submitted within 30 days. I know on F&F reviewing the vouchers that we go beyond 30 days.
It's just the mileage part.
Yeah, and I'm letting you know, I believe we reimburse beyond the 30 days right now.
Darren is looking in policy to try to address that. We do have employees that go from school to school to school in the district, and we want to be able to capture that on a, for lack of a better term, a month-by-month basis.
Sure.
What sometimes happens is the reimbursements are collected over the course of the year by the employee. They're submitted at the end of the year, and then they get a large check. But the problem is that has an impact on the budgetary pieces. It's very hard to forecast when those things come in. So
Right.
if this policy is adopted by the board, that's going to be communicated to staff that your reimbursements must be done on a monthly basis-ish, 30-day basis, because of the accounting and the forecasting piece associated with.
And I've been with other organizations that have similar kinds of rules. It only takes missing it once, and then the person's behavior is adjusted. So,
Yeah, and when the business office, they do an excellent job on their forecasting. They look at the first few months of the school year, and they're really able to generate what the remaining months are going to have. By being tight on this, it's going to make their projections that much more accurate towards the end of the year.
and I know we've gotten way better over the years too. I mean, there was a time where there was a ton of submissions at the end of the year, and it wasn't a huge issue, but it was.
Could be, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, other questions on 3440 or 4440? Then this would be an action item so that we can bring it for a first reading in September. There a motion, Joe?
Yeah, I move to approve policy 3440 and 4440 on job-related expenses for professional staff and job-related expenses for support staff as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Barbara. Any further questions? Seeing none, I will ask for an aye vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No?
Thank you.
And we also have policy 5136 and a new policy yet to be numbered. 5136 is personal communication devices, and the new policy is cellular phones in the classroom. And we've probably already heard about this, but just to kind of make it clear, at least what I think is clear, is we are changing the policy to take the cell phones out of the 5136 in terms of terminology and create the new policy distinct to cell phones. And basically, that's what's covered in 5136. And for those watching, the unnumbered policy is essentially taking cell phones out of the classrooms, an issue that has come up time and time again, particularly hard on our staff to have them in the classrooms. Questions?
Yes.
Barbara?
Joe, in reading this, I get the impression that they can have them, they just can't use them, except, and there's some exceptions. that
Correct.
They can have them in their pockets or whatever.
They cannot be out, they cannot be used in
Right.
the classroom. This policy is explicit, and it'll be advertised as such.
Right.
It does distinguish between a cell phone and an iPad, which is what we provide for an educational purpose.
Right.
What we've learned over time is the cell phone is not an educational device, and it is a distraction in the class.
Right.
And so we're just being very explicit with the cell phone piece, that if they're on their person, they're off, they're silented, they're in their
Okay.
pocket, and they're
Or in
not
their bag.
out
Yeah, they
being
might
a
be in the bag.
distraction in a classroom.
I just wanted to make sure that, I thought I read that they could carry them, but they can't use them.
They cannot use them in the classroom.
Todd, you want to?
Just a quick history. About 8, 9 years ago, there was a policy that said no phones in the classroom. Then we thought bring your own device might be a good thing to do. It didn't pan out, and then we got iPads, so it's like there was no need for it, but yet cell phones were showing up in classrooms, and the policy really wasn't strong enough to remove them. We did change that, I want to say 5 years ago, to no cell phones in the classroom. But then when we switched over to Neola, cell phones got combined with the other policy. And, you know, we don't want to exclude iPads or laptops, but we do want to exclude cell phones. So I just asked that be broken out, so it's just a matter of clarification. I don't think the problem is any worse than it was a couple of years ago or anything else. It's not, you know, a reaction to anything that's happened. It's just that I want to clean up the language so teachers and administration, you know, have the support to say no cell phones in the classroom. So it's not, you know, there's nothing that's gone on recently other than when we switched to Neola, cell phones were included with other personal communication devices that we do want in the classroom, and it just became very confusing. So all this is clarification, that's it, so.
So, thank you. So Todd, it's okay if they have them in their book bags or in their pockets, just so they don't bring them out. Is that correct? Or not at all in the classroom?
I would like to say not even in the building, but that's just
Oh.
not realistic. So, correct, they just can't have them out
Okay.
in the classroom.
Okay.
If they are, obviously, they'll be told to put them away, and then if they don't, then consequences begin. So,
Because it does say, you know, that they can
Yeah.
use them at lunchtime, et cetera, you
Yeah.
know, so they'd have to have it on them in
Right.
order to use it, so.
Right.
Thank you.
I think if some kids didn't have them on them, they would probably have an emotional
Oh,
meltdown. But
know.
that's,
No. Get the shakes.
Joe,
Thank you.
How do we assign, I'm just unfamiliar with, how do we go about assigning a new number to that one?
We would touch base with Richard, but my guess would be that this new cell phone policy would be 5136.01, which is similar to how
okay.
all the other policies are numbered when you have a general policy such as student discipline 5600, and then we have the consequences for student discipline, which is 5600.01. So
That actually answers my next question, because I was wondering if in 5136, we should parentheses reference cell phone policy, also see cell phone policy blank blank.
Yeah.
we do have the ability to cross-reference like that and
Might be a good idea.
hyperlink in the policy. So I'll have Lynn look into
Okay.
that.
Joe?
I thought this was, the draft of the cellular phones in classrooms was really well thought out. There are a number of different scenarios that are clearly covered. You know, what's it like? What is a classroom, right? It's not just in the building. Sometimes it's a field trip. So we clarify what can be done on field trips. I also like the fact that we really emphasize that there's some things that you should never use the cell phone for, ever. And we were very clear on that so that other students or people aren't threatened, humiliated, harassed, embarrassed, or intimidated really in any way, and gave very explicit examples of that. So I really thought that this was well thought out of all the different kinds of scenarios that could potentially occur. The one thing that kind of struck me a little bit, though, is the second to last paragraph in the cell phone policy, proposed one, is parents are advised that the best way to get in touch with their child during the school day is by calling the school office. I understand why it's there. I'm not necessarily advocating to remove it, but I'm wondering about the practicality of it in today's world.
It's, that's a recommended way to do it. It's rarely gonna happen. I mean, if students can have the cell phone and they're able to access them at lunch or during passing time, that's how it's gonna happen.
Right.
But to counter the argument, well, if they can't have their cell phones, and I really need to get in
Yep.
touch with my kids.
And that's why
well,
it's
yeah.
here. And I'm
But
not
it's basically, just a backup.
sure. Yeah, what is the means by which a parent should communicate then with their child? But they do have opportunity, during lunch, those kinds of times, so that they can make arrangements. Hey, here's what we're doing after school, or whatever that communication might be. So, I thought this was really well thought out, well scripted. Was this primarily provided by Neola, or was this by our team that
I asked
put this together?
Lynn to take the original policy and kind of work it towards cell phones. I took it, added a few things, and I think Joe and Lynn cleaned it up, and that's, I don't think we basically did this one from scratch, I believe.
Okay. This is really well thought out.
I agree.
Yeah, the only time they should have the cell phone on a field trip is if the bus driver's lost, then they can do Google Maps and save the day.
Okay, further questions on 5136 or the new policy? Then this also being an action item, I'll ask for a vote on this one. All in favor of accepting
I don't
5136
think
and
we
the
had
new
a
one?
motion, did we?
No, we don't have a motion. Sorry, thank you. Would somebody please make the motion?
All right, I will. I move to accept the revisions to policy number 5136, personal communication devices, and new policy, cellular phones in the classroom. Let's see if that one's got a number.
No, it
No.
doesn't.
As presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Greg. Now, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? 5-0. And does that make you happy, Todd?
Pardon
Does
me?
that make you happy?
Yeah, well, I mean, all it was is, we haven't really changed what we're doing. I just want to make sure that
We got
if
it.
there's an issue, if there becomes a conflict and a parent says, well, who says they can't have a cell phone?
Oh, we said it.
The Board of Education says,
Yeah.
so.
And I-
Okay, Yes,
Just one more comment on that. And we clearly spell out the consequences too.
Right.
And I think we needed to
Yeah.
do that. So and it's clear.
Right.
It's definitely clear.
okay, the last action item is on a revision to policy 8531, free and reduced priced meals. We had a statement in there that referred to providing eligible children with breakfast, but we didn't identify it is only at the schools where breakfast is so provided.
Correct.
And how many places is that, do you know?
About half of our elementary schools,
half.
and then up through our system. There are some locations though where the breakfast program is it's not in place, as there hasn't been a need identified for it at this time.
So this one was quite simply just adding some words to get this clear.
And it doesn't limit us in the future if we were all of our locations. It just added the language as to where it's provided.
Okay, any questions on this one? Barbara?
I see that that's a federally funded program.
Yep.
Do we get paid once a year after the year's over with, or how
Not
does it
sure
go?
what the reimbursement looks like
Okay.
for the federal food reimbursement, if it's something that comes in quarterly or if it comes in once a year at the end of the year.
Because, we have to provide the food and pay for it, so,
No, I don't think it's any of the food service program, which operates through Aramark. I believe they handle the reimbursement or
Okay.
assist in the reimbursement.
sense.
But it's not just one lump sum. I mean, we'll
Okay.
get it throughout the year.
makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the revision to policy 8531?
I'll move to approve the revisions to policy 8531, free and reduced price meals as presented.
Greg,
Second?
seconded by Mr. Como. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, Lynn. Okay, that brings us through the action items. We have several items that we had a first reading on that we want to go back through and just check on a few things, because there might have been some comments. There were some comments, actually, of things we might want to change or whatever. So, again, they're grouped. The first grouping is policy 2271, youth options, policy 5113.01, course options, and policy 5421, grading. And in all three of those, we added previously, we had added a sentence describing that you had to have taken AP courses in that subject area and scored a 3 or better before you could get weighted gradings on that. It was discussed at the board meeting last week, Wednesday, about the fact that we have been able to, in the past, provide financial support for kids that want to take the AP class, yes, the AP class, and may not be able to handle that. And Joe, you've added, you want to read the sentence you added?
Yeah, after the feedback from last week's board meeting, we added the line, financial support will be provided to students who qualify for free and reduced lunch and or have been identified as indigent, commensurate with the established business office fee schedule. So how the business office would reduce fees for reduced lunch, how they would reduce those fees for free lunch, and then what we would do if a student was identified as indigent, how this would be reduced for AP fee.
That has been added to all three of these policies, along with the sentence we added previously. That, okay, if we're making that revision at committee tonight, then we would be taking it back to the approval meeting in September with that revision on it. So at this point, this would become an action item. That's why it's worded as possible action item. So I would be looking for approval of the addition of that sentence to the three policies I labeled. Is there such a motion?
All right.
So moved.
That's okay, so moved is good.
Okay.
Second
Seconded by Barbara?
question.
Yes?
I notice on the second page, under it says non-resident student applications for course options. Why would they come to us? Because they don't have those opportunities in their school district? Is that why they'd come to us?
The student is here on open enrollment. They're a non-resident student.
Oh, okay.
Because they
Open
are our
enrollment.
student, they can access these programs.
Yep, okay, thank you.
And I'm glad to see this addition. We try very hard, in lots of our areas of our school district to make sure that possibilities exist for every single student. So I'm glad to see that this was discussed at our last board meeting and that, well, we'll see how we vote, that this may be incorporated, so.
Good, it was a good addition. Anybody else, comments, questions? We do have a motion on this one, so all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, Lynn. Also, we had the first reading on policy 3210, staff ethics, and policy 4210, support staff ethics. There were no changes. No, there were no changes that suggested at the last board meeting. We corrected the date, didn't we? Just saw that in red on there. Is that something new? Must be. It's all right, not a big deal.
17.
See, Lynn?
On the support staff.
Way on the bottom. Neola, 2016 has been changed to 07 to 16, the other way, yeah. So it's, but that's okay. We don't have to make a change here for a reading to, we've got a reading in place and we're staying with that reading. So there's no need for another action on that one. Barbara?
Joe, I guess letter J, where it says refrain from sharing draft working documents with other staff or community members until they're properly vetted. I guess that if I was, working on something, I would, ask somebody else a question, maybe teacher across the hall or maybe my principal. So explain that.
Well, if there's a work group in place, let's say that there's a math curriculum group.
Okay.
That is working on an elementary math, third grade math curriculum.
Down here at central office.
Down here at central office
Okay.
or at their school
Or at the
location.
school,
But the
okay.
topic is third grade math curriculum. And there are, 10 teachers, 10 third grade teachers that are working on this curriculum
Yes.
along with a coordinator. And a lot of items in that are up for discussion.
Yes.
The agreement is, the policy would dictate that you're working within that committee until those ideas are ready for a proper vetting. And then that's why we talk about the appropriate staff. That might mean go back to your elementary school and talk to the teachers about what's being proposed. That may be going through the curriculum cycle committee that exists, that may be coming to the teaching and learning committee of the board, and then that curriculum adjustment may end up in front of the Board of Ed. It's making sure that the work follows a proper vetting process so that things are not taken out of context, so that things are not enacted upon. That curriculum isn't official until it goes through the curriculum process. We don't want people adjusting practice, towards a new curricula if that has not been properly vetted. Just using that as an example.
So I hope you're not saying that I'm working on this committee and that I cannot discuss it with anybody on the committee, or they wouldn't ask me what I thought of it. They would keep it to themselves until.
The committee is in place to work on whatever the assignment
Yes.
is. And if the committee decides that part of the vetting process is to go back to staff and discuss it, then that's what the committee does.
Okay.
If the committee decides that we need to forward this along to the Teaching and Learning Committee for approval, then the committee members agree that we're going to let the Teaching and Learning Committee give us feedback or approve.
Okay.
And then go forward. It's not to limit conversation on a committee. It's to require that people follow a proper vetting process when a curriculum area is being worked on, when a handbook is being developed, when, there's crucial conversations that need to happen in and amongst the group that was selected to work on it. And then there are certain agreements made that that group will work on it and then present at the next level.
Well, then you are saying that you value, input from other staff members.
From the committee, yes.
It's just from the committee, not from other staff
It
members.
depends on what the assignment is.
Here's a better example, if I could. Let's say there's a committee that we have a situation where we have a number of schools that are declining enrollments, and the board says, put together a working committee of administration and staff to close some schools, okay? So as we're working as a committee, we're working through some drafts, we're brainstorming, and we decide that, one of the schools that we probably should close is Smith Elementary, okay? And so maybe there's a staff member there who gets upset about that, takes that draft, that brainstorming draft, and runs off and emails all the parents at Smith Elementary and say, they're gonna close your school. The next board meeting, you have 500 people
Yes,
in here,
yes.
ready
Okay.
to attack, on the attack. And then what that does is it destroys the entire work of that committee. You basically start over, you throw out what you've done, and all it was is simply maybe a brainstorming idea or working through something that may never even see the light of day when it's done. So that's, I think, the more of the issue is it's being used. If someone doesn't like something, instead of speaking up in a committee, they go try to create an attack on staff or
these
administration,
committees-
so.
Are these committees generally just out of central office, or could they be at the sites?
It could be anywhere. It could be the sites. The principal might have a sale team that want to work on something. And
Oh, okay.
if someone is disgruntled, they might take, like I said, something that's not ready for public consumption and
Yes.
go plaster that over a Facebook account. And then, even though it was never meant for anybody other than the committee, you create issues, fear, anger. And so I think that's more of what this is meant to be, is to not take something that really is just a brainstorming or a work in process and go put it out there as, this is what the board's gonna do, so.
Thank you.
And for the viewing public, we don't have a Smith Elementary School, so we're not closing one.
That's exactly why yeah.
Joe?
Yeah, my wife's maiden name is Smith. She's really upset now. She's buzzing me and
Yeah,
calling
yeah.
me, but I have my cell phone turned off, so.
Good play, Todd.
But in all seriousness, this allows the committee to do the work it's been assigned to do. You need to have a certain amount of space and time to get far enough in your work before you can really release it. And, that's how rumors get started, partial information. And that's how things can get kind of just
call 'em nowadays leaks.
Yes, there you go. There you go. So I think this is actually a really excellent ad.
Excellent.
To do some really good work. And like you said, Todd, there's work that's done sometimes by our staff that never sees the light of day because it just,
Doesn't go anywhere.
yeah. So, and then there's work that really needs to be has some very sensitive issues to it that really needs to be kept kind of amongst the committee members till they can really thoroughly examine it. So I think this is a great ad.
Craig?
So my interpretation of this would be that those on the committee would know those parameters before they moved forward. So every member would know if they can go back and talk to staff, or if they need to keep it within the committee, if they need to get feedback,
That's
the
why
direction
it's-
they need to go.
That's why they dictate the thorough vetting process. The district has picked some, the
Right.
curricular area, if it's a school discussion, there's a process for doing
Right.
that. For general third grade planning, that's a different type of
Right.
conversation.
Each committee could and probably would look differently at how far they could go with certain information. Okay.
Okay, we don't have any changes then to this 3210 and 4210, so we will just bring those to the board for the second reading and approval next month.
This is a new policy, isn't this?
No, it's a revision.
And the other one's been under staff ethics? I didn't know that.
Policy 9510, research in schools, that is a new policy, it was written recently. And actually, it was formerly in the guidelines, and we are bringing it from the guidelines into the policy so that it's readily available that way. There were no suggestions for changes at the board meeting on this one. Any changes here? It's quite simply gives the guidelines that has to be followed to have somebody doing internal research. And,
Ms. Baumgart,
yes, I'm sorry.
question for you, or I guess not for you, for Job. This says, all research studies carried out within the district. Is that staff, or is that students as well?
It would be staff. This would be research conducted of something in Waukesha. So oftentimes we have staff that are working on their master's degrees. They want to do action research. There's a IRB process that they have to go through the university. And what we're saying is that needs to be approved by the superintendent or his designee. And
So nobody doing a class project's gonna have to
No.
be approved by
if you're doing a
superintendent.
third
All
grade
right.
history paper.
Yeah. No, this is just when people want to study our staff, usually external people want to study our staff or want to study our students. And we require them to send their university's IRB, which we'll review. And if we're not comfortable with it, we'll send it back and say, you know, you need more safeguards on this to make sure no identification of any teacher or student is out there. So we do look at that pretty closely. We have it, I would say, there are many times where we've said, no, we just don't think this study is appropriate for our district, so.
No, thank you. I figured where it's located in the policy book meant that, but
It's a good
just for
question, though.
clarity.
Right.
Valid question. Okay, that would conclude the group. That was the first reading at our August board meeting, and the revision on a couple of policies, and the rest of them will just bring back the way they are. We still have a discussion item open on policy 3112, which we've talked about a couple times. And at our last committee meeting, we talked about maybe there's something more that's needed in here that we are dancing around, and we wanted to get it specifically in here. And I think what you'll see on the bottom of number 3 is trying to really get to the heart of the matter of where we've had some uncomfortable communications take place. And we've added a sentence here, I'll read it. Further, employees who engage board members with the intention of making disparaging, defamatory, and/or false or intentionally inaccurate statements targeted at their direct supervisor or an administrator will be subject to discipline actions. All employee concerned should follow the procedures outlined in the employee handbook. So this is, Joe, just, I don't know if you put this together or?
Yeah, Lynn and Todd and I put the language together. This does capture what we were presenting as at the last meeting, and then going back to when we first batted this policy around. This does capture an area that we need to have some policy on, and so this is what we're presenting this evening.
Any questions on that one? Greg, excuse me, Greg?
When I look at that, I see that it's, not okay for employees to do that to a direct supervisor or administrator, but it doesn't say it's not okay for an administrator or district supervisor to do that back to an employee. That I would have an issue with. Seems one-sided to me.
You mean if an administrator went to the board and said, we don't like this teacher? Number one, I can't imagine it happening, because if there was a situation where there was discipline or termination, ultimately that could come to the board, and then we've tainted the board. So the thought of that happening, I think, would be very, very remote, but, to put something in.
To me, it'd be better if it would say, eliminate the at the district, directed at the district supervisor, administrator, directed at another employee. I mean,
Well, the real goal here is to say, okay, if you have an issue with your supervisor, start with that person and express those, you know, and the issue as well, we'll get in trouble for that, but no teacher has ever been disciplined or made unemployed if they address a supervisor in a professional manner about issues that they're having. And then if they don't like that response, you know, they can come to this building. But I think to directly write some of the emails we've seen recently where you've had disgruntled employees writing things to board members, just very, very inappropriate, especially when there's a tremendous amount of inaccurate information involved with it. And I just look at what you know, I can't imagine any other organization that I've ever worked for or that I'm familiar with that would permit something like that. You know, the idea here is to push the person back to I don't know if I want to call it the chain of man, but to the direct supervisor, start the issue there. And 9 times out of 10, it gets solved there. But when you go directly to the board, and the board in this district is the hiring and the firing unit, you're the only ones who can do that to professional employees, that's very unsettling. And to me, it's just not necessary, especially when there is a chain of command you can follow and get results. So that's what I think more than anything. But you know, as I said, I just can't imagine an administrator going to the board and saying, you know, making disparaging remarks about a teacher. I would think I would hope that wouldn't happen, but I would see the board as hopefully responding
Well, we would-
negatively to the
And
administrator.
I know some staff people don't feel comfortable going to their immediate administrator.
That's right.
Well, that's okay. I mean, then they can come to this building, and
Maybe they don't feel-
sometimes they do.
And maybe they don't feel
Yeah.
comfortable coming
Yeah.
to central office.
Yeah,
And I'm not condoning, you know, behavior like
Yeah.
that, but I think if we said employee to employee, it would still cover
Yeah.
what you're saying, but it would also include administrators and direct supervisors in that same language.
and the key here is disparaging, defamatory, false remarks. You know, if a teacher comes to the board, we don't like, you know, what the superintendent puts in his Friday updates. You know, you know, that's one thing, but if they start in using different, you know, false information, those kind of things, to me, that's just not appropriate. But, you know, I'm hoping there is a free and fluid communications with the board, but there has to be some ethics to it. And that's really what this is saying, is that, you know, fine, contact the board, but make sure that your statements are ethical and honest.
Joe Cook?
I guess just for a matter of language then, if I'm understanding the discussion, statements targeted at their direct supervisor, comma, an administrator, comma, or
Other employee.
fellow employee will be subject to discipline. Is that capturing what?
It doesn't single out, to me, it singles out employees as written and doesn't single out supervisors or administrators.
Well, it could.
Yeah.
If, let's say, Joe wrote to the board nasty stuff about me, he's an employee, he's right, you know, I mean, so I think the term employees could cover really anyone, and you know, it talks about direct supervisor. I mean, you may add, a fellow employee could be added in there, and you'd really cover everything then. Because everyone in the district's an employee.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just saying as it's written,
Yeah.
it looks
Yeah.
like it's only if it's made against
Joe,
a direct
actually, those are,
supervisor.
I was just thinking, we could add the words,
Yeah.
"and or another employee," and that really makes it universal.
So that if
Yeah.
a district supervisor or administrator did do that, I'm not
Right.
saying that they would, but if they did, there would be some discipline for
Yep.
that too.
Yep.
Thing, right.
Yeah.
I do have Joe Coma first, and then I have you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I like that ad because nobody should be doing that. You know, period. It doesn't matter what your position is within the district. And I just think that not only does it add the fairness that I think, Greg, you were trying to achieve there. It's just, we just want to avoid any inaccurate, false, defamatory kinds of information.
So it's employee.
Yep. And the first word employee, so further employees, in that very beginning part of the sentence, it applies to literally everybody.
Everybody,
So,
including administrative staff and you.
even the superintendent,
Barbara.
yep.
Well, I'm uncomfortable with it because as a teacher, if I had concerns, one time we had a ineffective principal many, many, many years ago. Of course, teachers talk amongst each other. You want that to be stopped?
No, we're not saying that. We're saying is, as a teacher, if you had an ineffective principal, you went up to the chain of command, you didn't go right to the board president and make up, some unethical statements about him or her. But,
Right.
yeah, if you wanted to talk to your fellow employees about it,
That'd be
would-
hard to stop.
That's happened since day one of the world. So I don't think we'll ever stop that, and I don't know that we need to
I don't know that you
stop
need
that
to.
issue. But
Right.
what I'm saying is, going up, getting to the level of the board who has the authority, the only authority in the district to hire and fire is unsettling, and it's not good for supervisors who are maybe doing the best they can, who are following the rules, which an employees may or may not agree with, and then they come off and they as opposed to going through a process which could settle the matter at a much lower level.
But, we certainly can't deny that, I've been around for 25 years or more. We certainly can't deny that there haven't been some ineffective, staff members, administrators.
Right,
And
right.
of course, people are going to make
Yeah.
comments about
Right.
it. But it bothers me that, we have to be so strong in saying discipline actions. Wow, I mean,
Well,
I'd be
but
afraid
look
to
at the
talk to my
terminology.
partner.
We're talking about disparaging, defamatory, or intentionally false information.
But I might not think it's disparaging. You might think it's disparaging. I don't mind those three
Well,
words. as much.
if you, if that principal doesn't come in till 9 o'clock every day and you report that,
Well,
that's not disparaging or
no,
defamatory.
no.
But if that principal's there at 7 a.m. and you come in and say, oh, he's never here till, 9:30 a.m., now you've crossed the line. So, I think that's the difference there. And, again, obviously that type of thing gets kicked back to administration to investigate and review. But again, some damage has been done in the meantime that's unnecessary.
Do you think that, that the word board members, I guess I don't want staff to think that they can't talk to me.
No, we've said, I am saying, and I don't know if we have to put it in
They do great.
writing, but we want a fluid discussion between staff and board members. We want you, to hear from them what's going on.
And there will be
We don't
gripes.
want, and there might be some issues like, we don't like some of the policies that are happening. That's fine. I have no issue with
Okay.
that. But when you turn it into an attack on an individual that's unnecessary and in many cases unethical, to me, that's where we draw the line. So, I think it's good for you to hear from staff.
Sure.
Often, when we are talking about, compensation issues or so on, it's good for you to know what they're thinking so you
Right.
can,
Right. Right.
address those issues when
Right.
we're voting on it. But again, staff members have some things that they want you to know about their classroom, about what's happening in their schools,
Those are fine.
positive things. And we don't want to get in the way of that at all, so.
Well, in instances over the many years I've been on the board, I usually say, that's really not my responsibility as a board member. And that usually ends the conversation.
Okay.
Because there are things
Yeah.
that,
I mean,
that are not my
over
place to
time, board
discuss.
members have come to me and they've said, I was apprised of this issue.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't personalized at all. It was an issue. I would investigate it and,
Right.
deal with
No,
it,
I got
I had
so
one
two
more
other people
comment.
waiting.
Pardon
We
me?
have two other people waiting.
Okay, I want to come back, Todd.
Amanda?
Yes, thank you. I guess my comment is following in line with what Barb was saying. When this came to us, and then after we read it and then had some time to mull it over, two questions that come to my mind was, where is this coming from? Because it felt like there was more that was, and I contacted Joe and kind of and then Todd, based off of what you just said now, it seems that there's been some issues with emails and so forth. So that explains your addition here to me. That makes sense, not to, be bearing false witness, or disparaging, defamatory information. That question was answered. My other question then was, when can they come speak to us, they being staff or whoever, come speak to us with issues? I think this was brought up at a different meeting where we said a lot of what we hear is, the pride and the joy and all the good things, but we'd be fools to tell ourselves that there's not, concerns that if I had an issue with a direct supervisor, I think most of the time I personally would be able to do it, but not everybody could do that. So a follow-up question then is, when there is a concern, obviously we would like to go directly with the person that there's an issue. Most of the time that's probably the principal. If they can't go there, what's in place now? What's the next step up? Who's the next person?
They could go to a director, they can go to an
Okay.
assistant superintendent, they can go to the superintendent. And literally every time they have gone directly to a board member, it comes back to me or one of our assistant soup to address anyway. So, and quite honestly, Amanda, most of those things are not personalized, and that's fine. I mean, I don't think I've had a board member here that at one point or another hasn't addressed an issue they've heard from a staff member, and that's certainly okay, as long as they aren't personalizing it in a manner that kind of disparages another employee. And so that's, to me, where it's totally unnecessary. But, again, we don't want to destroy any of the fluid conversations between whoever you want to talk to on the staff. It's good to talk to people, all people. I mean, I would hope you talk to people who have issues and people who are really happy here. I know there are some. So, I mean, we don't want to inhibit that. But I'm just saying that if we say it's okay to disparage people, go after them for whatever reason because they've had issues, that's what we're saying is not okay.
No, and I agree. I as
Yeah.
Greg said, I don't condone this activity in any way. If I can have one more question here. Going back to the first half of this paragraph here, it states, it says, both staff and board members share a keen interest in the schools and in the education, and in education generally. And it is to be expected that when they meet at social affairs and other functions. So, of course, I question that as well. Social affairs and other functions, is that implying to like district-sponsored events? I guess I'm directing.
I'm
it
missing,
Joe.
is that in item 3?
That's in item 3, yep. It's the first half of the social interaction paragraph, sentence 2.
District-held events, if you're a member of an organization and you should show up at the same organization's annual banquet, it would be that event. It would be the football game, the play, anything that would be outside of what would be a traditional established meeting setting.
Right.
And if I could just add two things, that there was some question about there's outlined procedures in the employee handbook that talk about if you are a staff member and you have a concern with your direct supervisor, there is a concern chain that you can follow there. It's in the employee handbook, and we spelled that out in section 1 and in section 3. And the other part of this, when you get into the general conversation, the general dialogue between board members in the bylaws, and I forget which number it is, I'd have to look it up, there is a statement that the Board of Education does want to have ongoing and open conversations with community members, with the parents in our district, with students when appropriate, and with our staff. So as a board, you've adopted a bylaw that says we value these conversations. What we're proposing to you as administrators is a little bit of a constraint on that, when it comes down to those explicit attacks on somebody's performance. Todd used me as an example. If I were to go to any one of you about what's going on, in and around my conversation, that'd be inappropriate without going through what would be that chain of command. And that's what this policy aims to address, is that piece. I would anticipate, and I think all of our administrators and all of our staff, that when we get together at the retirement dinner, people are gonna talk about what's going in and around the schools in Waukesha, and what's going on with family, and I haven't seen you in 25 years, how are things going? All of that's acceptable. The area that we're aiming to address is the staff member who says, Joe Cook did this, and then lists a bunch of things that are not accurate and that are intentionally set at ruining my reputation or Todd's reputation or any of our other administrators or supervisors in the district, because that does happen.
Oh, sure it does.
For all of the examples that Todd gave about how we solve things with, when concerns are brought to us, it does happen that people are called out, by name with misinformation about what is happening. And those are the areas where this aims to address. We tighten it up to performance evaluation back in, I think, December and January, when we were first talking about this policy, before the February approval. And then most recently, when there were some questions that came up as to why this is being built into the handbook. But I think that the language that was added tonight about the fellow employee coming into the meeting tonight, we talked about the procedures outlined in the employee handbook. I think that captured the general concern of what the board and what the committee had.
Okay?
Thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, for me, this gets back to some of the real basics. What are the responsibilities of a board, and what are the responsibilities of administration? The operational side of our business is handled by administration. The governance side is handled by us. We set the policies, the administration interprets the policies and upholds the policies and performs the policies. So what this does for me is it actually clarifies that and delineates. So when someone, whether they're an administrator or an employee, communicates with us, and that's okay, and we have it in many areas of our policy also saying it's okay to talk to board members. This gets back down to that basic delineation of what a board is responsible for and what administration is responsible for. When you're trying to resolve problems, you need to be able to have some sort of pathway, guidelines to resolve issues. And we've spelled that out in our handbook clearly. So we refer back to our handbook, and those policies, or that handbook is what we had written and we all agreed to. And that's the behavior that we would expect our employees to follow. So there's nowhere in our handbook, though, where we talk about it's acceptable to be able to defame someone, and so this is just making it clear that those communications, there's a process in place, and there's a proper way to talk about issues, and this just helps to clarify that, so that we don't have someone going too far. So as we changed the portion of at their direct supervisor, administrator, or other employee, that really encompasses everyone and treats everyone fairly. It covers everything. So I'm comfortable with this. I'm very comfortable with this. We just should not have that kind of behavior happening at all in our district. You should never defame someone. You should never falsely state something about someone, period. So I'm very comfortable with this, actually.
Go again?
Yeah, Greg wants to go.
Go ahead.
I just wish that it wasn't directed at board members, because I want a staff member to feel that they can say things to me, but I can't solve the problem, is what I usually say to them, or I refer it to central office, and you know that, I do that. But I just feel.
can do
under-
that.
we
You
want-
can
I
do
mean,
that. You're
if
not
you-
being
if-
stopped.
No, I know.
That's not being stopped.
But it,
Yeah.
What's being, if I may Bill.
Please.
What we don't want to have happening is false information
Well, of course.
and defaming information
Of
come to
course.
us as
I
board
understand.
members.
I understand
That's
that.
just wrong.
Right, of course it's
And
wrong,
that's
but
what
people
this
will
is.
do it.
This is not stopping, general conversations, dealing with facts. And so, we have outlined processes for our employees to resolve issues. I can't tell you the number of times I have spoken with a parent or a teacher or somebody, and they said, I have problem X.
Right.
And the first thing I'll ask, well, have you gone to the teacher to talk about problem X? Oh, no, I haven't done that. Well, have you gone to an aide in the classroom to talk about problem X? No, I haven't done that. Have you gone to the principal and talked to the principal about problem X? No, I haven't done that. So you're jumping all the way up to the president of the board of education to solve the problem? Really? And you haven't even tried to give the people who are involved with whatever problem X is a chance to resolve the problem? I get those all the time. And so it's important to have the processes to go back to and have people work through the systems that we've developed and we've put in place to resolve issues.
Well, what about outside schools, that parents that call us, and we all get calls from parents.
Well, they're not
Good
our
calls and not
they're
good
not our
calls.
constituents, so I don't give very much
Parents aren't our
credence to.
No,
constituents.
no, I think he means, well, I mean, they wouldn't, this doesn't apply here. I mean, parents can say whatever we want, and
Yeah.
that's the way it is. I mean, we
Oh, sure.
we live with that every day.
Sure.
And we understand that.
There's
a-
there's a
And I-
board-
and I also think, in terms of staff contacting you about issues, I mean, we're talking about bad stuff. If a staff member calls and says, Barb, our workload is horrible and the superintendent isn't doing anything about it, that doesn't here. I mean, you'll call me and say, you're not doing anything, we'll tell you what we're doing.
Right.
So I mean, I'm talking about where they are actually making derogatory, defamatory statements, and even though I might be doing something about workload, if their perception isn't there, fine. We'll deal with that one. This is situations, emails that I have seen that were really out of line in terms of attacking supervisors without having to confer with other people here or conferring with them. So I think this is probably going to impact people very few and far between.
I would agree.
But if you don't put it out there, then they can
They're gonna do it.
do whatever they want. So but again, I think the first couple lines here does say, we, informally, whatever, we want staff to talk to board members. And, they may even bring up items of business or policy or
Of course,
whatever else.
of course.
Absolutely okay. I mean,
course.
that they're citizens too. So, I mean, we certainly don't want to impact that fluidity, but we just want to put people on notice that, be ethical in when you have an issue. If you feel the need to go directly to the board, be ethical about it. That's what it is.
And at that point, we also have to remember we have a responsibility too. As we hear these things, we don't jump to the conclusion that they're telling us something that's totally accurate and they're going to try and solve it. We as board members cannot just jump into that thing without us going back to the proper chain of command that work their way down for the gathering the right information. So there's a little bit, it's a little bit easier for us because in many cases we don't really know
Right,
what they're
right.
talking about. But as board members, we can't let them assume that we are going to solve their problem. We'll look into it, but we can't solve it. Or maybe eventually we might. Okay, so that one is, now that's,
Easter.
oh, I'm sorry.
When I look at the policy and it talks about established procedures outlined in the employee handbook, when I look at the handbook, if I reference that, am I looking at the grievance procedure?
Grievance procedure, and without having it in front of me, I believe there's another section for evaluation, so, yes.
Okay. So I don't know if we would want to spell that out here to make that more clear. So that people
Well,
are-
it could be referred under the reference section, I guess, to that part of the handbook.
So it isn't so vague.
But there might be multiple parts and it could change, and then we'd have to change this. I would keep it more,
Yeah, the more detail you get into these, the hairier it gets. I mean, there's somebody that they can go to, and if they can't
The
find
grievance
anything.
procedure and the evaluation procedure would be the ones that we're referencing there. Because I looked through it a couple times, but that's the only section I found it in, under grievance procedure.
While you're looking at that, I'll ask Lynn a procedural question, because this is in place today, so now we're making revisions to it, correct? So we bring this back for another first reading?
I'm making notations tonight, and it is just a discussion item.
Yes.
So we can agendize it for
We did not. That is
next
correct.
committee meeting.
Right.
And agendize it as an action item for the September meeting for this group.
For this group.
Yes.
That's, yeah,
If that is-
let's do it that way. Then we would have the first reading at the October
Correct.
board meeting, and the probable action item at the board level would be in November.
Correct.
In the meantime, we'll deal with it.
And then the wording of that last section there that's underlined,
I can read that back if you'd like.
maybe it could be further, all employees who engage board members. You know, just say,
Sure.
say it right at the beginning, all
All
employees
employees,
Yeah.
yes.
who engage board members, on and on and on. Statements targeted will be subjected to discipline actions.
Will be subject to this.
Or any employee,
Any employee.
any
But if it says
employee.
further, all employees who engage board members with the intention of making disparaging, defamatory, or false or intentionally inaccurate statements will be subject to discipline actions.
That's different than will be subjected to. That's different. That's what you said it the first time.
Right.
Okay, Joe?
And it says right at the beginning, we're talking about all employees.
Oh, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Right.
Do you want that added?
Yeah,
Okay.
you got that?
Can I read it back the way that I heard it tonight?
Start with further.
Sure. All employees who engage board members with the intention of making disparaging, defamatory, and/or false or intentionally inaccurate statements targeted at their direct supervisor, comma, administrator, comma, or another employee will be subject to
Disciplinary.
disciplinary
I
action.
think it should be disciplinary there, yeah.
And then, Lynn, that next sentence, it probably should say outlined instead of outlined.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just one thing, Todd, I would just like you to know, here's an example. I got an interesting message today on the computer from a parent saying their child has problems with behavior. Well, it's not my place. I'm not the teacher, I'm not the
Yeah,
principal.
yeah.
And that's what I said, well, thank you very much for being interested in helping your child with this, but I'm really not the person
Right.
to resolve this. Perhaps you want to talk to a counselor about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, no, that's
This
fine.
person appreciated that.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And we don't want to get in the way of that or
Yeah, I know
either.
it
It's
is.
just that
But I want
parents aren't
people to-
included here because
Right.
parents can tell you whatever they want,
Right,
and that's
right.
just
But I just
what we have
guess
to
I
live with,
want
so, yeah.
people to know that
Yeah.
as board members, we're open to listening, and we know
Yeah.
that everything is
Right,
not
right.
perfect, you know?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, no, I think you've been very good about moving it back to where it needs to be. So I have never had an issue with a board member either get an employee complaint or a parent complaint, not bringing it back and for us to resolve. So
Yeah, I
that's
always
not an issue.
refer to you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Greg?
thank you.
Joe and Todd, I just want to let you know that I think we've changed this to meet the needs of this board. This Neola policy that we originally saw is all throughout the state, and we've tweaked it to what we feel is important for this board. So I think we've really looked at it and discussed it and improved it actually over the initial policy that we saw.
Okay, and Lynn, you'll take care of the logistics on this.
Correct. You'll see it again next month as an action item.
Any other recommendations for future committee meetings? Something that needs to be addressed. I will ask Lynn at this point, do we have another stack sitting someplace? Thank you.
Yes, we do.
For nodding your head, Joe Cook.
Yep, we will be starting what is round one for the
I have my notes here
17-18
too, in
school
case you
year.
forgot.
Coming up.
Coming up, as well as we've had some other adjustments to the U.S. Department of Agriculture guidelines for the food service program, as well as some technology updates that we'll be entertaining in September. So,
Okay, thank you. Anybody have anything else they want to add? If not, our next meeting for the committee will be Tuesday, September 19th. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Bill.